Dustin. Let's get right into our first film. I'm gonna play a quote, and I want you to tell me if you know what this is from. Are you ready?
Yes.
To avoid fainting, keep repeating. It's
I can't
only
pull
a
up.
movie. Only a movie. Only a movie.
Sorry, what'd you say it was?
Last House on the Left. Only a movie. Only a movie.
That is absolutely right, but Duskin, as always, you got it. So Wes Craven directed this grimy, arty thriller about two teenage girls who encountered escaped prisoners in the big city and how the tables get violently turned. Was there a specific reason that you liked it or you didn't like it? And do you think it belongs
Well,
on the list? So yeah, tell me your thoughts.
well, I don't know if like is I it
Yeah, yeah, I know it's hard because it it
like first of all, I just wanted to be a little bit amusing how it's not this super well known film. You just stated that it's like grimy, but you did explain to people what the plot is. But forget
well,
the plot. Just
yeah, I will definitely get
yeah,
to that. But
so
yeah, I understand that it's appalling and sort of exploitative. Uh, exploitative.
the okay. Well, first of all, just like throwing out still, this was Wes Craven's debut film. The man, creator behind Freddy Krueger. So you have that aspect of the film from the get go that makes it a curiosity item. Is always interested to see, if like the talent is there from the get go. But then like also besides that, it it definitely is not someone I love, and it definitely is not perfect, and it has some flaws about it. But I just find like firstly for the horrible like mouth that they are depicting, it is effective at making you feel those basic like things that the film is about. But also like besides that, I I do like it how it also is a revenge film, and how like and like this is just a little bit interesting how like the weapon of choice that the guy uses for his revenge is a chainsaw. This was before two years before Texas
Yep.
Chainsaw Massacre.
3 years
So
before. Yep.
yeah, so Wes Craven beat Toby Hooper, to the whole chainsaw mayhem, in like so with like, and that's actually is a little bit interesting how like the 1970s was really like transgressive and really was groundbreaking with violence. Like Last House, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was like the two big ones. So you just had like a couple owns, but yeah. So like besides all that, and then also one like I just feel that that like Last House has like a unique feel to it. Like what else what else like whole film especially has some like folk folk music to it, and like for all of that, I feel makes it like a whole film worth seeing.
Well, exactly. Yeah, and I wanted to mention some of that too. And you did such a great job, basically recapping that. Um, I did not know this until I was actually researching that the original script was actually supposed to be a porno, and then Wes Craven actually went and redid that. He rewrote that, but it was supposed to be a porno, and all the actors and actresses were actually on board for that. And then of course he went and rewrote it, and the actress Sarah Cassell, I don't know if I'm saying her name right. She actually had a horrible time filming this movie because it's such a traumatized. The character's so traumatized, and to make matters worse, the actors from the gang, the Krug gang, actually harassed her off screen in an attempt to be more method. They actually would call her and things like that, and both Sarah, the main actress and her fellow actor Fred Lincoln actually refused to talk about this movie in later interviews because it is so messed up. Um, saying that though, there is some interesting things to it. Um, I found it strange the humor that was in it. I don't know if you found that was strange. Like the police, they're almost comic relief, and the hillbilly music, which you and I had talked about. It's very unique that it almost provides exposition.
Yeah,
Um,
like, but yeah, I Disney Evil was always fun to watch, especially when it came to wholesome.
I was gonna say, did you ever hear about the drama that happened between Wes Craven and Tarantino over the filming of Reservoir Dogs in 1992? Tarantino was calling him hypocritical. Wes
And
Craven was like, "Well, I'm not trying to glorify violence, though." So yeah, like yeah, that was his whole thing. Wes Craven said that Reservoir Dogs glorified it, where Last House on the Left uh, um, was just about the evils and the horrors of violence and not glorifying it.
so yeah, all of that just makes that some like interesting.
Exactly, and the reason I think it belongs on this list, and I think the reason people should see it, even though there are some issues with it, is that I think it is still important historically, because it's a very early example of a horror subgenre of just the tragedy of happenstance, right? And I don't want to give everything away if people want to see it, and they'll totally explain it. But another reason is, it it was directed by Wes Craven, who would later become a huge name in horror films. So I think it belongs on this list. On to, are you ready to move on to the second movie on the list?
So
All right, the second movie on the list. This one has to be one of the scariest PG movies that I know of. The city where
Poltergeist.
hold on a second. The city where it was shot was also used in the 1978's Halloween, in 1980's The Fog, and the slang expression "pod people" originated from this film. And you think it's which one?
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
That is correct, Duskito. So Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Um, Obviously, it has an incredible cast, right? It has Jeff Goldblum, has Leonard Nimoy. That's right, that's Spock. The same guy who
Yeah.
portrayed Star Trek Spock for almost 50 years is featured in that. Um, but one of the reasons that I have this on my list is it's a body snatching plot, right? And those are always unnerving. Um, and this is a remake of the 1956 original. Um, and I actually like this one more. The film is about a group of people who discover the human race is being replaced with clones. What did you think of this movie, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978?
It is pretty damn creepy how we cover like we're about to cover a new whole subgenre with is feel like sci-fi whole or body hole. Like around that time, we also
Yep.
had films like Alien, but
Contemporary horror.
but
Yep.
yeah, but yeah, it takes a premise like even the whole like saying like pod people like you know you can say that sounds like a little bit easy, but like the execution of it definitely is not, and that like scene at the end it just makes the film effective.
Well, exactly. And you nail it on the head. Although this was not an independent film or an independent project, it was still very creative. The director Kaufman, I think after seeing this, he had a unique and fearless vision. But it was still rooted in the Hollywood sensibilities. I really liked his use of camera work with the low angle shots, the zooms, and the lingering wide shots, especially in the chaotic scenes. I think it was really effective. I really do.
I
Sorry, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just gonna say that I agree, and how you find interesting how it has a only appearance by Jeff Goldblum who like went on to star in like a iconic wholesome. You know what one that is?
Did you say Jeff Goldblum?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's The Fly, right? No.
yes,
Yeah, it was The Fly. Yeah, I was thinking it was The Fly because that's actually another great remake. Um, I think The Fly, because the Fly was originally in 1958, right? Um,
yes.
and then the 1986 Jeff Goldblum one actually makes the 1958 one look like a kids show. So yes, Jeff Goldblum actually did great work around this time when it came to horror films. Is what.
Yeah, you, that was like a common trend, how like the Fly, Razor Body Snatchers, Fiction, um, like how you had a lot of like sci-fi, a lot of like sci-fi, like borderline horror films that was influenced by like the Cold War and like the atomic bomb from like the 50s, and then like when special effects and like makeup got more advanced in the 80s, Hollywood remade all of them, and it is like a good thing because of like the remakes all pre-jam effect, and now like you said that you like the remake of Erasing the Body Snatchers more. Where I do want to say though that I actually like recommend someone to like see both of them, the original two.
The Thing, the 1982's Thing, right? I thought that was better than the 1950 Thing because the 1980 Thing is more terrifying to me. And then of course there's the 2013's Evil Dead, which was another great remake in my opinion because it trades in the absurd humor from the original for more of a brutal terror. But yeah, this movie, the reason it's on my list is it's a great remake. You know, when I was looking at Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and I was trying to go between the first one's 50s, right? Yeah, the
Yes,
50s take and then the 70s take. I watched both of the trailers or trailers people had put together, and I immediately went for the 70s version, mainly because of Spock. I saw Nimoy in it, but yeah, yeah, the original was 1956. But another reason I think this belongs on the list is like we talked about, it's an early example of contemporary horror, and it blends in that sci-fi element. But and in doing so, it gets away from tired cliches, right? That you would expect in a
yes.
horror, like not just somebody chasing you with a knife, and not just a crazy person after you or whatever. It's different. It involves a lot of creativity in this thing. But yeah.
Uh, exactly. And but yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Like, it would be cool to try to make a sci-fi whole film like myself, but that would be like that would like require like a bigger budget. E- like to be honest, like I think that's a reason why like Sasso films you just have so many of them being made, because it's a hell of a lot easier to like film someone running around with a knife than to just do this outdoor, like subject matter facility and not make it come off as either like, laughable or like cringe inducing.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, which is kind of funny because this does have laughable moments. Moments. I mean, like the pods. The pods and the pod people. Like it's silly. It's silly, but it's scary. Like or I'm sorry, it's eerie. I think this movie is still eerie. But anyways. Yeah. Did you have anything else that you want to say about it?
No.
Um.
Okay.
Let's get right into the next one. Okay, Duskin. So you mentioned that you would love to be able to do a horror film with a
Yeah.
low budget, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it is definitely doable because one of the best horror movies, films, I'm sorry, one of the best horror films that I have seen, and this is just one that I just saw just recently. It's a 1920 silent film, right? And it was made before horror was even a genre. It's a German production. Do you know what it is?
The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Duskin, as always, sir, you are 100% correct. And one thing I would like to say, well, let's start about what it's about, right? It's a story about a hypnotist who uses his powers to make someone commit murder, right? So it's already unique. The story was partially inspired by a strange carnival murder and a circus sideshow in Berlin called Man or Machine, where a man performed while hypnotized. Yeah, as I already said, it's a German production, and one thing I thought was interesting when I was researching all these movies was um, most of the creepy early silent films were actually German. They were German films. Um, yeah. The writers actually wrote this back in 1919 and sold it for $200. They sold the script for $200. That's Hans and Carl. Um, Sets were constructed for less than $800, and leading actors were paid $30 a day. Now I understand back in the 1920s that was probably a lot, but $30 a day. Um, Sorry, I just have some interesting bits here. When the film opened at the Capitol Theater in New York of April 1921, audience members actually booed and demanded their money back. A month later, the Chicago Daily News wrote that the film was, quote, a healthy thing for Hollywood and all other places where films are being produced. The film shows American movie producers new possibilities in style and method. Yeah, I love this film. I have absolutely no negatives, which is actually really surprising considering it is a silent film on a low budget. Um, what do you like about it?
Well, the biggest thing about it, that I would want to say is like the obvious one, which is the look of it. How you like so yeah, so the exact movement, name was German expressionism. How like around the same time you also had like Nosferatu, with everybody to check out, or like
Yeah,
Metropolis, that does not like attempt to like capture reality at all, and like in fact, this like this film is really influential on filmmakers like even today. Like for example, if you watch like the films of Tim Burton,
yep,
he his like visual style like copies it so much from like Edward Scissorhands to like the Nightmare Before Christmas, like Batman. It just like goes on. Um, but yeah, that's the big one. How it was made by like people who like generally like felt about their craft, and they made it artistic. And then like also Nelson is that the whole like sleepwalking and like hypnosis, like having him as like his slave. That is a concept you don't exactly see a lot. and
exactly. Yep.
and then like also besides that, it had perhaps the earliest Chris ending that there is. So all of that, like I am really enthusiastic about that film too.
What I found was the visuals were really powerful. And then when I went and I looked it up, I didn't know that their budget was so low because electricity was strictly rationed in post World War One Germany, right? At the time, so the director actually ended up painting light beams on backdrops, and he used that's why he used the unusual camera angles on top of it, and it worked so well. I have never seen a movie as effective, and I know that's saying a lot. I love this film. I have no negatives about it. This is definitely a recommendation. This is my highest recommendation.
I mean, I definitely agree with you. I'm never gonna tell someone to not watch this,
That's
especially
true.
on Hawking.
Oh, Duskin. All right, so the fourth movie on this list was released in the UK in November 1956, and it was based on a French novel titled She Who Was No More. Um, Obviously, Duskin already knows this one. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing this right. Lou Diablique. Did I say that right? Lou Diablique?
Yes.
1955, Lou Diablique. It's French, so I had to watch it with the subtitles. But um,
Well, that's the way I watch it too. I'm not gonna be watching any foreign film, with dubbing.
yep, exactly. So this movie, it takes place in a French boys' boarding school, and it's run by a headmaster who is basically making the boys' lives unpleasant, to say the least. Um, Dusk and I already talked about this, but it is included in the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. It is a book by Steven Schneider. Um, one interesting thing that I wanted to bring up um, is that Alfred Hitchcock actually attempted to buy the rights for this movie, and he lost out on it. But he was such a big fan. Some state, now this is not perfect. I mean, we don't know, but some state it was the influence for the 1960 film Psycho. Um, what do you think about that statement, Duskin?
As in retrospect, you like how the actual plot similarities between Diaboliques and Cycle is like the similarity still is is lasting, but in like retrospect, how like is both black and white, and like both of them is like charcoal driven, like it's not like it's so completely opposite of like whole films now, and then also you have um like I I do really like Diablo a lot. I would go as far to say as it's one of my favorites, but like it is pretty damn effective. And like I like to say that it builds slowly but surely to great climax.
Nice twist at the end, huh?
Yeah, you have who is it, and then like go and like that made me think about Skyfall, like especially in like the scene towards the end when like the detective gets killed, or when the sister goes to investigate.
Yeah, and it has a lot of comparisons because I felt the same with Psycho as I did when I was watching this, where I was guessing. I was guessing up until the final scene, right? And I had this overwhelming sense of dread when it was just resonated. The
Like
only music is over the opening credits, right? If I remember right.
yes,
Yeah, that's the
yeah,
only time. So that was kind of a surprise to me. But it was still
I
effective considering because because it makes you realize how much other directors and how much at least US Hollywood directors rely on the music. Like okay, like even taking horror out of it, like Star Wars. Star Wars, in my opinion, relies heavily on its soundtrack. Can you imagine doing Star Wars without any music?
I doubt it will have become this phenomenon.
Exactly. So there's so many movies, and that's why this one I think belongs on the list. Is basically what you said, and it's also got a very unique message to the audience at the end of the movie. It's a disclaimer urging the audience not to give away any spoilers. Let's go ahead and jump right into the fifth and final one on the list. Okay, so the last one on my list is a 1979 horror classic that introduced the world to the Tall Man. It features
That
an
is a
Phantasm. It features an iconic bed nightmare sequence that was number 25 on the cable channel Bravo's list of the 100 scariest movie moments, and Entertainment Weekly ranked this as the 17th scariest film of all time. Um, Basically, it's about two brothers who discover that their local cemetery is overrun by ghoulish morticians. The writer spent a couple weeks in an isolated cabin in the mountains of outside Los Angeles to get inspiration while writing the script. So the script is really well done, but it came off as a little silly. One thing I thought was interesting was J.J. Abrams, who co-wrote Star Wars Episode 7, the 2015, said that the
mhm.
character Captain Phasma and her chrome design was based on the ball in this movie. So there's a lot of interesting tidbits with this movie. Is a reason why it lands on this list as a classic. But it was made for around $300,000, but it spawned a multi-million-dollar franchise that's still going, right? And I don't know if you've ever heard of the game Slender Man, and there was a couple girls that I forgot how many years ago that actually killed their friend because they thought Slender Man was talking to them.
And you definitely see the similarities, at least I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, so this film, the reason I had to put it on another reason I put it on this list is this is gonna sound strange. I like the film for the same reasons most people would dislike the film. All right, the story. Let's be honest. The story is paper thin. Right? It's thin. It's got horrible acting. It's got no characterizations. It's got no depth and horrible special effects. But Duskin, those are the reasons that I love it because you know my passion is watching bad movies, right? Um, so to be more specific, to sum all that up, to me, all of that boils down to this movie being imaginative and bizarre, and that is why I think it should be watched on Halloween.
I like that film too. I do have to agree with you about the action not being that good.
It's the most cliche, right? It's the most cliche. When you think of scary movie, you think of Halloween movie. This is definitely the most cliche one on the list.
Yeah, but it was an early cliche. Like I have to fall Phantasm a bone more so on this. I have seen horrible movies. How effective it is depends a lot on the way that you see it, and I really do feel that like for like serious horror films especially you should watch this alone by yourself, like him, with the lights out. Way.
Well, hey, Entertainment Weekly liked it. J.J. Abrams was inspired by it, so it's probably not as bad as I'm making it sound. And that's the reason I have it on my list. Is I love bad films on Halloween, and I don't know if the audience. I'm sure some people in the audience would find this very entertaining. Duskin, it's been great having you on the show, bro. Would you like to tell the audience where they can find you? You have a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you can find me under so Dustin's movie review.
Duskin Movie Reviews. Yep. Well, here at Film Reel, we actually appreciate you having you on the show. You are an asset. Your movie knowledge is second to none. You are the movie master. Whenever I do movies, you are the go-to guy. Here at Film Reel, you are the main man. So I appreciate having you on.
Well, thanks. I do like that, and I do always like talking movies reviews. Yeah, yeah. Till next time.